I was a cop for 30 years and retired at age 50. Of course, I had some weird calls, but I'll never forget the night my partner Steve and I were called to respond to a domestic abuse report. The call came from a neighbor in Detroit. These calls were never really a big deal. They usually gave us something to do during the night shift, not that I enjoyed dealing with couples fighting and all that stuff. We arrived at the house on Maple Street. I still remember the address clearly, and the door was left wide open. The second we stepped inside, the strong smell of marijuana filled our lungs. It was everywhere. But it wasn't just marijuana, there was also the strong smell of chemicals, which we assumed was either meth or cocaine. We made our presence known by asking for the couple to come out into sight. A thump from upstairs gave away their position. Steve had his hand on his holster, ready to pull his gun, but I wasn't nervous yet. Steve told me to move quietly up the stairs. We normally listen to each other, so I went along with his paranoia. There were 3 doors, 2 open and 1 closed. The closed door was in the direction where we heard the thud in the ceiling. I banged on the door before swinging it open myself. The smell hit us first, then we saw the body. It was obviously rotted, we knew even in the dark. We pulled our guns and Steve turned on the light. I told him to scan that room while I searched the rest of the house. I was shaking all over now. I hated my job at that moment. I wanted to run back to the car and leave because I was sure I could die at any moment. My hand was stuck on the door knob until I finally had the courage to turn it and push the door open with force. I turned the light on, but there was nobody inside. It was a disturbingly tiny room with no windows and no furniture except for a dirty old cot. Suddenly, Steve screamed and I rushed across the hall to see what was going on. There was some shirtless guy lying flat on top of one of the dressers in the room. We had him at gunpoint, yelling at him to come down, when something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me to the floor. There was a hand coming from under the bed. I stomped on the arm with my other foot and pulled out a frail, trashy-looking woman who was obviously high. I cuffed her and Steve cuffed the man. We were on our way outside with the 2 addicts screaming at us, but we had one final surprise coming. Some psycho from upstairs started screaming and charging at us down the stairs with a knife raised in the air. Steve reacted just fast enough to save my life by 2 seconds, shooting the guy dead. This was a crack house. Somehow, none of the neighbors could smell anything suspicious. The dead woman on the bed was killed by the man we caught, who admitted to killing her due to lack of payment. The man was sentenced to life without parole. The woman was sentenced to 30 years. Steve says he never felt bad about what he did. He says he just rid the world of one more piece of trash. My partner and I responded to an alarm call. The location was an old office building in Birmingham that had been converted to a doctor's office. There was a pharmacy attached to it as well. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. The keyholder arrived on scene and we went in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that the keyholder didn't have a key to, so we took the elevator up to the 2nd floor. The elevator opened to a pitch-black hallway except for one overhead light at the end of the hall. We started checking the doors and so far all were secured. We got to the last office and sure enough, the door was unlocked. We entered and saw it was an unused office. The door opened to a large waiting room and reception area. There were about 10 or 12 exam rooms. We cleared all of them with no problems. We exited the office and immediately something seemed off. That's when I realized the overhead light at our end of the hallway that was on before had been turned off. It was replaced by another light over at the elevators. I looked at my partner, and he was completely white. I asked him what was wrong and he said, "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" I told him yeah. My buddy said, "Well, now they're all standing open." Sure enough, all the offices down the hallway we had just checked were now standing open. The fear factor kicked in at this point, so we started clearing and securing offices again. We finished the last office and on our way out, just before we turned the corner to get into the waiting area, the main door just slammed shut. Then our radios started going crazy with some kind of static feedback. Now I just wanted to get the hell out of there. We got back in the elevator and headed down to the 1st floor, hoping to make contact with the keyholder again. However, the keyholder was nowhere to be found. I contacted dispatch and requested a callback number for the keyholder so I could tell him what we found. Dispatch said that the keyholder was still on his way to us and would arrive in 5 minutes. I told dispatch that we had already been out with the keyholder. Dispatch asked me to call them. I called and the dispatcher told me that there was no way we were out with the keyholder. She said that the alarm company had only just made contact with one. Eventually, the real keyholder arrived on scene and I asked her about the man that had led us into the building. She asked me to describe him, so I did. She said that sounded like one of the doctors that used to lease the office on the 2nd floor at the end of the hall. She then said that he had committed suicide at his summer home several days ago. I was responding to a call in the village of Chester. A resident was reporting noises coming from one of the abandoned buildings across the street, most likely trespassing. I arrived and began my search in the building. It used to be a 2-story convenience store, but now it was completely stripped empty except for the parts attached to the floor like the counter and shelves. The lights didn't work in there either. I checked every small aisle for anyone possibly hiding, and then I did the same thing upstairs. It was completely empty. On my way back to my car, I looked back at the building and saw somebody at the window on the 2nd floor. It was a woman with long gray hair down past her shoulders. She was no doubt looking down at me with a wide smile on her face. I hurried back inside, making it upstairs in no more than 10 seconds, but the window was clear. There was nobody in sight. I checked all 3 aisles at least 10 times. I checked behind the counter. I checked the bathroom. It was clear. I was a little nervous, so I left again, thinking my mind was fooling me. I looked back at the window and there she was again, the same mockingly disturbing smile on her face. I went back up there again, this time running around all 3 aisles trying to find this woman. I was about to give up once more and leave for good when I noticed something in my peripheral vision. It was on the ceiling, a dark shade of black latched onto the ceiling. I shined my light up there and there she was. That crazed woman looked at me, still with a horrifying smile on her face, as she held onto 2 hook-like objects in the ceiling with her hands while her feet were pushed up against the tile to gain support. She laughed like a maniac all the way down to the station. I don't know if she had some kind of mental disability or not. It seemed like she was just toying with me, but not in a good way. She stared me down through the mirror the whole ride. In all my years of being a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I had only experienced 2 horrifying situations. I'll share with you the worst of the 2. It was a slow night, and I was patrolling the dirt roads in my cruiser. At this particular spot, there were dense woods on both sides of the road. Then it all started. I spotted somebody jumping into the woods on the left. I only saw half of them, though they were gone so quickly. I pulled up closer and shined the spotlight into the woods. I didn't see them. Unfortunately, it was kind of my job to check on things like this, so I hesitantly stepped out from the car and began searching. In a moment like this, I was so ready to pull my gun as I was actually terrified. Then the classic snap of a branch from behind a tree almost made me want to run back to the car, but I instead did my job and called for them to come out. Someone wearing a mask stepped out from the tree. I told them to raise their arms, take off their mask, and come to me slowly. They raised their hands, but they didn't remove the mask. I tried to show my authority by yelling this time, ordering them to take it off. They looked as if they were about to take it off when suddenly he or she looked to their left, and then back at me. I heard footsteps coming from my right. I drew my gun. I yelled as loud as I could for everybody to come out with their hands up. You may be thinking, why? Well, if you were in this position in this setting, you would have been scared out of your mind just like I was. Another person wearing a mask walked over, this one holding an axe. I had my gun locked on him, but suddenly footsteps started coming from all directions. I looked around and I was surrounded. There were at least 10 strangers wearing masks surrounding me almost in a circle, with only an opening behind me. Half of them were armed with axes and similar weapons. I stood there, gun raised but not even aimed at anything at this point. I felt like I was going to throw up. One of them, I'm not sure which, finally broke the silence, telling me in a muffled, deep voice, "Go away." My heart dropped as he said this, but in a way that I knew I was going to live. I turned and ran for the car, driving down the road half a mile while calling for backup. As you would guess, the whole group was gone from the woods when a search squad arrived. I have a theory on this, however. I believe that what I witnessed was some kind of messed up secret society that was planning on trapping an innocent passerby. I think that whoever jumped into the woods as I was passing recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. Had I not been a police officer, I believe they would have stopped me, led me to the woods, and done whatever this group does for its sick kicks.